His breath was warm against my neck when he whispered, "Ethan will never make you feel like this." And then, his hands slid lower, rough and commanding, as my back arched against the cold marble counter of my kitchen. I should have pulled away. I should have screamed, pushed him out, anything but what I did. Instead, my lips trembled as his mouth claimed mine, and every ounce of reason inside me drowned in a flood of forbidden fire. Because this was not my husband. It was his father. A big thank you to every single one of you subscribed to this channel. You are the reason I keep bringing these raw, real-life stories to life. If you are new or you keep coming back without subscribing, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button right now because that is the fuel that powers this channel. And please, do not just watch and leave. Drop your thoughts in the comments immediately after this story begins, because your voice matters here. Now, let us get into it. Introducing me and them. My name is Hannah. I am a 32-year-old woman living in Texas, and until a few months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I was married to Ethan for 8 years. He was everything a woman could want on paper: tall, handsome, ambitious, and financially stable. People called us the golden couple in our circle. But golden couples tarnish too. Ours began to rust slowly, silently, until one day I realized I was lying next to a stranger every night. Ethan traveled often for work. Even when he was home, his mind was always buried in his phone or his laptop. When I tried to talk about it, he promised to do better, but things never changed. I felt invisible in my own marriage. And then Richard walked into my life, or rather, I finally saw him. Richard was Ethan's father, a 58-year-old retired military man. He carried himself like a man who had lived through wars and knew how to win battles. Broad shoulders, steel gray hair, and eyes that could see right through you. He was the kind of man who did not just walk into a room, he owned it without trying. I had met him before, of course, during holidays and family events, but never like this. Never long enough to notice the way his laugh sounded like confidence, or how his presence made every other man feel small. The cookout that changed everything. It started at a family cookout at our house. Ethan was home for the weekend and decided to invite his parents over. The Texas sun was brutal that day, so I wore a light sundress, yellow, floral, and innocent, or so I thought. When Richard walked in, something shifted in the air. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt that clung to his frame and a pair of jeans that looked molded to his body. For a man pushing 60, he looked better than most men in their 30s. "Need a hand with the grill?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, like whiskey sliding down your throat. I nodded, my throat dry, and handed him the tongs. That was the first time our fingers brushed. A small thing, barely a second, but it sent a jolt through me so sharp I almost gasped. For the rest of the afternoon, I could feel his eyes on me, not in a creepy way, but in a way that made my skin burn and my pulse race. When I laughed at something, his gaze lingered on my mouth. When I bent to pick something up, I felt him watching the curve of my back. It was wrong. God, I knew it was wrong. But I could not stop feeling it, the pull, the danger, the thrill. The first whisper. Later that evening, after everyone had eaten and Ethan was busy on his phone again, I went inside to get more drinks. Richard followed me. "Beer?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Whatever you are having," he said, stepping closer than he needed to. Close enough that I smelled his cologne, rich, musky, intoxicating. I opened the fridge, and when I turned back, he was right there. Not touching me, not yet, but his presence filled every inch of space between us. "You deserve better than this," he said softly, his eyes cutting to where Ethan sat outside, laughing at something on his phone. My breath caught. "Richard. Do not say my name like that," he murmured, and for the first time, I heard the hunger in his voice. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was dangerous. This was madness. And yet, I could not look away. Then he smiled, slow, knowing, devastating. "You are too young, too beautiful to be this lonely, Hannah. Age is just a number. But what I can do for you, that is something your husband will never understand." His words curled around me like smoke, seeping into places I did not know were empty. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wanted to know what it felt like. To be continued in Chapter 2. White heavy checkmark. Do you want me to continue and write Chapter 2, Crossing the Line, with another 2,000 plus words now? Or should I expand Chapter 1 fully to meet the 2,000 word requirement before moving on? I can also include detailed romantic scenes, full inner conflict, and dialogue-rich tension as per your request. Which do you prefer? Great! We are diving into Chapter 2, Crossing the Line. This is where things get even more raw, intense, and twisted. The pacing will build from tension to full-blown betrayal, with emotional depth, forbidden lust, and a near-caught moment to keep it suspenseful. This chapter will be 2,000 plus words, written in plain English, with organized paragraphs, no contractions, and authentic dialogue. No subscriber appreciation in this chapter, as that was only for Chapter 1. White heavy checkmark. Chapter 2, Crossing the Line. The morning after the cookout. I woke up the next morning with a pounding heart and a restless mind. Ethan was still asleep beside me, his back turned, breathing steady. I stared at the ceiling and tried to replay yesterday in my head, tried to convince myself that I had imagined the tension with Richard. Maybe it was all in my mind. Maybe I had read too much into a look, a word, a smile. But then I remembered his voice. That low whisper that had curled through me like a match striking dry wood. Age is just a number. But what I can do for you. It was not imagined. It was real. And I hated how much I wanted it to happen again. I got out of bed quietly and made my way downstairs. The house was silent. Sunlight spilled through the large windows, painting the kitchen in gold. For a moment, I stood there and wondered what was wrong with me. How could I even think about my husband's father like this? What kind of woman was I becoming? But beneath the shame, there was something else. Something hotter, darker. A hunger I had not felt in years. Circumstances bring him back. Ethan left that afternoon for another business trip. "Just 3 days," he said, kissing my cheek like a man who was already gone. I smiled and nodded because that was what a good wife does. But inside, I felt hollow. I watched his car disappear down the street and felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I would not have to fake closeness. Guilt because I knew exactly whose face my mind would wander to when the house became too quiet. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. "I left my watch at your place yesterday. Can I swing by later to pick it up?" My fingers hesitated over the screen. This was harmless, right? He had forgotten something. That was all. "Sure. I will be home all day," I typed back, and then stared at the message long after it was sent, my pulse thudding in my ears. The knock on the door. When the doorbell rang that evening, my stomach dropped to my knees. I opened the door, and there he was. Richard. Tall, broad, wearing a black t-shirt that hugged his chest and a pair of faded jeans. He had sunglasses in his hand and that same easy confidence that made every breath feel heavier. "Evening, Hannah," he said, his voice smooth like it had been waiting to say my name all day. "Hi," I managed, stepping aside. "Come in." He walked past me, and the scent of his cologne trailed after him like a secret. He moved toward the living room and sat down like he owned the place. I hated how my body responded, how every nerve lit up just from being near him. "Nice place when it is quiet," he said, glancing around. "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "I guess it is peaceful when Ethan is away." Richard's eyes met mine then, sharp and knowing. "Peaceful," he repeated slowly, like he was tasting the word. "Or lonely?" My throat went dry. I guess a little of both." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that stripped away every wall I had. A simple favor that was not simple. "I think my watch is on the kitchen counter," he said, standing up. I followed him, because that was what my body decided to do even though my brain screamed at me to stay away. He found the watch near the sink, picked it up, and then looked at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. "You look different today," he said softly. "How so?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Like you finally remembered you are a woman," he said, stepping closer. "Not just someone's wife." Heat surged through me, fierce and overwhelming. I took a step back, but my back hit the edge of the counter. He saw it, and his eyes darkened, his jaw tightening like a man barely holding back. "Richard," I began, but my voice broke. "Hannah," he said, his voice rough now, deep with something dangerous. "Tell me to leave, and I will. Right now. Say it, and this ends." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I did not want it to end. The first touch. He reached up slowly, like giving me time to run, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingers grazed my cheek, and I swear my knees almost buckled. No one had touched me like that in years. With care, with hunger, with reverence. His thumb lingered near my lips, and I made the mistake of parting them slightly. That was all it took. His mouth crashed against mine, hot and demanding, and I melted into him like I had been waiting my whole life for this kiss. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me against him, and I felt the hard truth of what he wanted pressing into me. I should have stopped him. I should have screamed, but instead, I kissed him back harder, deeper, like my body had been starving and he was the only thing that could feed it. From a kiss to more. His hands slid down to my hips, then lower, lifting me effortlessly onto the counter. My sundress rode up, and his fingers traced my thighs, slow and teasing. Every nerve in my body was on fire. "Tell me to stop," he growled against my ear. I could not. God help me, I could not. Instead, I clung to him, nails digging into his shoulders as his mouth moved down my neck. Each kiss burned like sin, and I wanted more. I wanted everything. The almost caught moment. Just when things were spinning out of control, the sound of a car door slamming outside jolted us both. We froze. Richard cursed under his breath and stepped back quickly. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break through my chest. I slid off the counter, pulling my dress down with shaking hands. "Relax," he whispered, brushing his fingers over mine before grabbing his watch. "You are safe. For now." He walked to the door and left without another word, leaving me breathless, trembling, and consumed by the taste of him on my lips. What did I just do? When the car outside drove away, just a delivery guy dropping a package, I collapsed into a chair and buried my face in my hands. I was not the same woman anymore. Something had shifted inside me, something I could never take back. And the worst part? I knew this was only the beginning. The day after Richard kissed me, I could not look at myself in the mirror without feeling a wave of shame wash over me. My lips were still tender from his touch. My skin burned with the memory of his hands. I wanted to scrub it all away, but the truth lingered like perfume on fabric. You can wash it, but the scent clings. I told myself it was a mistake. I told myself it would never happen again. But that was a lie I could not even believe for 1 second. I craved him. Every stolen glance, every husky word, every dangerous promise in his eyes. I wanted it all again, and the wanting terrified me. Ethan came back the next evening, and for the first time, his presence felt like an intrusion in my own home. He kissed my cheek like a stranger, and I stood there thinking about how his father had kissed me like he wanted to devour my soul. It happened a week later. Ethan had to leave town again, another client meeting, another excuse. When he hugged me goodbye, I barely felt anything. I was already thinking about Richard. That night, the loneliness ate at me like a slow poison. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another. I was halfway through the second glass when my phone buzzed. "Richard, are you alone?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Yes." There was no hesitation in his reply. I am coming over. I should have said no. I should have thrown my phone into the sink and walked away. Instead, I found myself checking the mirror, fixing my hair, putting on lipstick like a woman about to do something irreversible. When the doorbell rang, I opened the door without a second thought. Richard walked in, and before I could even speak, his mouth was on mine. There was nothing gentle about it this time. It was hunger, raw and consuming. He pressed me against the wall, his hands gripping my waist like I belonged to him. Tell me you have not thought about me every second since that day, he growled against my lips. I did not answer. My silence was enough. Clothes fell like secrets spilling from guilty mouths. We barely made it to the bedroom. The sheets tangled around us, and for hours, there was nothing but heat, skin, and the sound of my own voice breaking in ways it never had before. When it was over, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest rising and falling like I had run a marathon. Richard traced a line down my arm and said, "Now you know why age is just a number." And in that moment, I hated myself for how much I agreed. The following days were a blur of lies and stolen moments. Richard and I became reckless. A touch here, a kiss there, secret texts that made my heart race like a thief running from sirens. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface. And mine was about to explode in my face. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Ethan came home early from a trip. I did not expect him. I was in the kitchen when I heard his voice. "Hannah." I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. "You are home early," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. He walked in, eyes sharp. "Where is Dad?" My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "His truck is outside," Ethan said, his tone flat, like a man who already knows the answer to the question. Before I could speak, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Richard walked down slowly, wearing nothing but his jeans and a look that said everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan's face turned red, then pale, then red again. "You," he whispered, pointing at his father. "You slept with my wife?" Richard did not flinch. "You were not taking care of her," he said, his voice calm, almost mocking. Ethan lunged at him, but Richard grabbed his son's wrist midair and twisted it with the ease of a man who had fought bigger battles. Ethan cried out in pain. "Stop!" I screamed, but my voice sounded small, broken. Richard shoved Ethan back and said, "You have no idea what kind of man your father really is, do you?" Ethan froze. "What the hell are you talking about?" Richard looked at me then, his eyes cold and hard. "Tell him, Hannah. Tell him what he has been doing while you were crying yourself to sleep." I stared at Richard, my mouth dry. "What?" Richard turned back to Ethan. "All those trips? They were not for work. They were for women. Escorts. Affairs. I found out months ago." Ethan's face twisted. "You are lying." "Check your credit card statements," Richard said with a cruel smile. "I kept the receipts. You learned this from me, son. The only difference is, I do not lie to myself about what I want." Ethan looked like he wanted to kill him. He turned to me, his voice breaking. "And you? You believed him? You betrayed me with him?" Tears burned my eyes. I started, but there were no words big enough to hold the truth. Richard stepped closer to me, his hand brushing my shoulder possessively. "She did not betray you, Ethan. She chose better." Ethan's face crumpled. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there, shaking, tears streaming down my face. "What have we done?" I whispered. Richard tilted my chin up, his eyes glinting with something dark. "We did what we wanted. And now, there is no going back." But the worst part came weeks later. Ethan filed for divorce. My friends turned their backs on me. My reputation was in ruins. And just when I thought it could not get worse, Richard disappeared. One night, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single line in his handwriting. This was never about you. This was about teaching my son a lesson. And then I understood. I was never his love. I was his weapon.